the Ural Mountains. They stand as the ancient, rugged spine of Russia, a sprawling 2,500-kilometer barrier dividing Europe from Asia. Much of this range is a place of perpetual snow and frozen earth, with peaks that, while not the world's tallest, are guarded by a notoriously vicious climate. For most climbers, it's a challenge. For some, it's a final resting place. In the winter of 1959, a group of 10 experienced hikers set their sights on a peak in the northern Urals, Mount Otorten. In the language of the local Mansi people, its name meant, "Don't go there." But the group's leader, a 23-year-old radio engineering student named Igor Dyatlov, was drawn to the challenge. He was brilliant, capable, he'd built his own radio at 15, and he was an accomplished mountaineer with 9 expeditions already under his belt. This trip was special. It was a Category 3 trek, the most difficult classification in the Soviet Union at the time. If they succeeded, they would all be awarded the Master of Sport in hiking, the highest honor available. They were a team of 9 men and 2 women, mostly fellow students from the Ural Polytechnic Institute. They were young, tough, and they knew what they were doing. They submitted their route plan, it was approved, and on January 23, 1959, they set off. They promised to send a telegram to their sports club by February 12th to signal their safe return. The telegram never came, and what a search party eventually found on the slopes of another mountain, a place called Kholat Syakhl, or Dead Mountain, would become one of the most terrifying and baffling mysteries in the history of mountaineering. The first few days of the journey were filled with the easy camaraderie of a team in sync. They took a train, then a bus, finally arriving in a small village called Vizhay. They were tired but in high spirits. They settled into a local hotel, saw a movie at the town club, and got a good night's sleep. The next day, January 26th, they wrote letters home. Igor Dyatlov went to the post office and sent a telegram to the University Sports Club. Arrived in Vizhay. All is well. From Vizhay, they hitched a ride on an open-top truck, heading deeper into the wilderness. The brutal cold began to take its toll. One of the hikers, Yuri Yudin, felt a sharp, agonizing pain flare up from his chronic sciatica. By January 27th, after a day of trekking, he couldn't go on. Not wanting to hold the team back, he made the difficult decision to turn back. It was a choice that would save his life. The Dyatlov group was now a team of 9. On January 31st, they reached the Lazva River Valley. Here, at the edge of the highlands, they set up a small cache of food and equipment to be picked up on their return journey, lightening their packs for the final push. February 1st was day 10. Their plan was to cross the pass and make camp for the night on the other side. But the mountain had other ideas. A blizzard descended, visibility dropped to near zero, and the group became disoriented. They strayed from their intended path, ending up on the eastern slope of Kholat Syakhl, Dead Mountain, about 20 kilometers south of their goal. By 5 p.m., they realized their mistake. Down below, about 1.5 kilometers away, was a forested area that would have offered shelter from the punishing wind. But to go down there meant abandoning the altitude they had fought so hard to gain all day. With daylight fading, they made a fateful choice. Instead of retreating to the safety of the forest, they would make camp right there on the exposed, open slope of the mountain. It was a decision that would seal their fate. The sports club had expected a telegram by February 12th. When it didn't arrive, nobody panicked at first. Delays were common in expeditions like this. Yuri Yudin, the hiker who had turned back, even recalled Dyatlov telling him they might be a few days late. To calm the increasingly anxious parents, the club's director even told a white lie, claiming they'd received a message that the group was fine. But by February 20th, 8 days past the deadline, there was still only silence. The truth came out and the families demanded a search. A rescue team of volunteer students and teachers set out immediately. Soon, the military joined in, with planes and helicopters scanning the planned route. For 6 days, they found nothing. Then, on February 26th, a student searcher spotted it. The group's tent on the northeast slope of Dead Mountain. It was partially collapsed, buried under a thick layer of snow. Inside, the rescuers found a scene of bizarre and hasty abandonment. 9 backpacks were there, filled with coats, pants, hats, and personal items. Food was laid out, ready to be eaten. They also found 4 cameras and 5 personal diaries. The last entry was dated January 31st, but it was the tent itself that presented the first chilling piece of the puzzle. It had been sliced open with a knife from the inside. One gash was large enough for a person to crawl through. Why would 9 experienced hikers, in the middle of a blizzard, cut their way out of their only shelter? Outside, a trail of 9 sets of footprints led away from the camp, down the slope. The prints told a story of pure panic. Some were from a single shoe, others just socks, and some were completely bare. In this frigid wasteland, they had fled without proper clothing or footwear. The trail of prints continued for 500 meters before being swallowed by the snow. Following the general direction of the tracks, the search party traveled another 1.5 kilometers until they reached the edge of a forest. There, under a towering Siberian pine, they found the remains of a small fire. It looked like it had burned for about 1.5 hours. Near the ashes lay scattered pieces of socks, a handkerchief, and scraps of wool. The lower branches of the pine tree, up to 5 meters high, were broken. Someone had desperately tried to climb it, perhaps to get a better view. And there, just a few meters from the dead fire, they found the first 2 bodies. Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonischenko. They were lying in the snow, lifeless, dressed only in their underwear. They wore no shoes. Doroshenko's hands were burned. Krivonischenko's nose was missing, and a piece of his own skin was found in his mouth, as if he had been biting his hand to stifle a scream or fight off unconsciousness. The next day, the search expanded. 3 more bodies were found scattered between the pine tree and the abandoned camp. The group leader, Igor Dyatlov, Zinaida Kalmogorova, one of the 2 women, and Rustam Slobodin. Their positions, all facing back towards the tent, suggested they had been making a desperate attempt to return. Dyatlov was found clutching his chest, wearing only a sweater and a vest. His watch was stopped at 5:31. Zinaida Kalmogorova was better dressed but had a large bruise on her side. Rustam Slobodin had a small fracture in his skull. But for these first 5 hikers, the coroner's conclusion was tragically straightforward. They had all died of hypothermia. For a moment, it seemed like a case of a terrible, yet understandable accident. That all changed 2 months later. In May, as the snows began to melt, the search for the remaining 4 hikers resumed. A member of the local Mansi people, helping with the search, noticed some scattered tree branches near the pine tree. Following them, he found a pair of torn trousers. And then, 75 meters away, in a deep ravine, he found them. The last 4 members of the Dyatlov group lay buried under 4 meters of snow. They were more warmly dressed than the others, some wearing clothes that had clearly been cut from their deceased comrades. But the findings of the autopsy on these 4 turned the case from a tragedy into a terrifying enigma. Ludmila Dubinina, the other woman in the group, was missing her eyes and her tongue. Semyon Zolotaryov was also missing his eyes. But their external injuries were nothing compared to what was found inside. Both Dubinina and Zolotaryov had suffered massive internal trauma, including numerous broken ribs. The coroner noted that the force required to cause such injuries, without any significant external bruising, was comparable to the impact of a car crash. And yet, they had been alive when it happened. Nikolai Thibault-Brignol had a catastrophic skull fracture, again caused by immense force, but with no corresponding external wound. Even more strangely, the clothes on Dubinina and Zolotaryov tested positive for low levels of radiation. And around Semyon Zolotaryov's neck was a camera, the 5th one found. In a moment of sheer panic where he didn't even grab a coat, he had remembered his camera. Tragically, the film inside was destroyed by water damage. The investigation was now a military matter. With 3 members of the group dead from violent, crushing injuries of unknown origin, murder couldn't be ruled out. Yet, investigators found no signs of a struggle. The local Mansi people were peaceful and had no motive. In the end, the official Soviet investigation was abruptly closed. The files were classified, and the cause of death was officially listed as a compelling unknown force. For decades, the story of the Dyatlov Pass incident was relegated to the world of conspiracies and campfire tales. The mystery spawned over 75 different theories. Some claimed the hikers stumbled upon a secret military weapons test. Others blamed the local Mansi people for defending a sacred site. A theory quickly debunked. A more sensational theory suggested an attack by a Russian Yeti, pointing to a single, blurry photograph from one of the recovered cameras showing a dark figure in the distance. In his book, Dead Mountain, author Donnie Ikar proposed a scientific cause: infrasound. He argued that the unique dome shape of Kholat Syakhl could have created a Kármán vortex street in the high winds, a phenomenon that generates low-frequency sound waves. While inaudible, infrasound can induce feelings of intense, irrational panic, nausea, and breathlessness in humans. This, he argued, could explain why the group suddenly went mad with terror, cut their way out of the tent, and fled into the lethal cold. Then, in 2019, 60 years after the event, Russian authorities reopened the case. And in July 2020, they announced their final conclusion. The compelling unknown force was not a weapon, a monster, or a conspiracy. It was a slab avalanche. Investigators believe that when the team dug into the slope to pitch their tent, they unknowingly destabilized the snowpack above them. As the blizzard raged through the night, piling on more weight, a slab of heavy, compacted snow broke loose and slid down onto the tent. It wasn't a massive avalanche, which is why their footprints weren't buried, but it was sudden and terrifying. The sound, and the weight of the snow pressing down, sent them into a panic. They sliced the tent open, the fastest way out, and ran downhill to what they thought was safety. In the disorienting darkness, they became separated. Some tried to start a fire by the pine tree, but hypothermia was already setting in. Dyatlov and two others made a futile attempt to return to the crushed tent for supplies but froze to death on the way. The final four, after taking clothes from their dead friends, sought better shelter. They dug a snow den for protection, but they did so at the edge of a ravine. The ground beneath them gave way, and they fell into the deep snow below. The crushing weight of the snow from the fall and the subsequent accumulation is what caused their horrific internal injuries. The missing soft tissues, like the eyes and tongue, were likely scavenged by animals. The radiation on their clothing was traced back to the KYSHTYM nuclear disaster, a major accident that had occurred 2 years prior, 600 kilometers to the south, spreading radioactive fallout across the region. In 2021, a team of Swiss scientists backed this theory, creating a model that showed how even a small slab avalanche could generate enough force to cause the devastating injuries seen on the hikers. The pass where the 9 hikers lost their lives was officially named Dyatlov Pass in their honor. A monument stands nearby as a quiet memorial. Yuri Yudin, the 10th hiker, the sole survivor, spent his entire life trying to uncover the truth of what happened to his friends. He passed away in 2013, never knowing the final official explanation. After 61 years of wild speculation, the mystery was solved. The truth, it seems, wasn't a monster or a secret weapon, but the terrifying, indifferent power of nature itself.